Welcome everybody to week 3. This is February 1st. Hopefully everybody got here in time to go through your audio and video setup. This is something that you should want to look at every time you log in to make sure your microphone is working properly for class. I want to do a quick quality check just to make sure I'm set up for class. Please go ahead and raise your hand if you can see the red record button up in the top left, if you can see quality check at the top of the slide, and if you can hear me speaking. All right, thank you. Please put your hands down. And this is just your personal reminder to go ahead and remove any distractions while we're here together for the next few minutes. Please go ahead and make sure your cell phone is turned off. Please make sure the door to your office is shut. And please make sure those in your house or office know not to disturb you for the next few minutes. All right, so today I want to go over our learning objectives real quick. Our first objective is going to be able to identify the pros and cons of integrating learning technologies in the classroom. It's going to be identifying the benefits of using written communication, and it's going to be you guys describing how you would change your lessons and classes to create a blended learning environment. So real quick, I want you guys, based off your own personal experiences, what do you think the pros and cons are to using communication and online technology in the classroom? Would anybody here like to raise their hand and offer to share a positive to using communication technologies in education? Rebecca.
Hi, I think that a pro could be that there's greater access and more opportunity for people to connect with each other.
Yes, thank you. That is obviously one of the pros that we see with using online communication technologies is it allows students and educators with their students to be able to stay in more constant communication and to be able to work on things outside of the classroom. Esteban.
Well, I just want to add to the cons, basically, technology, since now that if you're like teaching distant learners or whatnot, that there's a higher probability of procrastination because you're not in like a face-to-face environment, and I guess it's just much easier to actually do that, and that could be a downfall to the learning experience.
Yeah, that's true. Obviously, when you deal with any type of technology, there's a lot of distraction out there. It's very, very easy to get off track. TJ.
I think one of the biggest cons is going to be the cost of actually implementing the technology, because it's not like as simple as just mass producing a book. It actually can be a small fortune to actually implement some technologies.
Yeah, for sure. Like when we look at things like Google Office, I'll call it Google Office, but all the Google technologies are free to use, but there's definitely a lot of good technologies where you have to subscribe to it, and that can definitely add up costs, especially for like entire schools. An entire school purchasing something is going to cost a lot more than a single person purchasing anything. All right, those are all very, very good responses. Thank you. All right, so to begin with our discussion for today, we need to start off about talking about purposeful technology. So when Dr. Garrison talks about technology, he specifically emphasizes that whatever technology we're using in the classroom, there has to be a specifically designed purpose for it. It's no good to go, I'm going to use this piece of technology in my classroom just so I could be using technology. If you do not have a predefined reason or purpose for it, it's really not going to be adding anything to your classroom environment. Let's go over some of our pros here for using technology in the classroom. It's going to create conditions where we can share ideas easier, where it's easier to collaborate, and it's going to make it easier to share critical discourse and feedback outside of the classroom. It's going to allow us to do these different group activities and collaborative learning environments when we're not necessarily together physically inside the classroom. And obviously the cons, these were mentioned here before, but first off, social interaction doesn't necessarily equal collaborative learning, and we also have to avoid ideological cocooning. So we have to make sure that we are seeking those outside opinions and ideas, and not necessarily going towards everything that we're perfectly comfortable with when we're researching information or we're finding those learning environments to be a part of. So a real quick activity, in the chat box down in the bottom right, I want you to type one positive use of using technology in the classroom, and I want you to type one negative of using technology in the classroom. Yes, greater access to information. Obviously, it's like you have an entire library at your fingertips. Efficiency, it's much quicker to write and create presentations and things like that. A negative, yes, information overload. What is good information versus what is bad information? That can be very, very hard for certain students to figure out. Or finding too much information can also be a negative. It's very easy to deliver that information, yes. And it can be more interactive when used correctly. Yeah, these are all very good responses. Thank you. Move on. We also want to talk about writing versus speech. So when is it beneficial to have verbal conversations versus when is it beneficial to have written conversation? According to Feinberg, writing compared to speech obviously has a lot of positives about it. First off, you have to put a lot more, you typically have more time to put more thought into what you're going to communicate. You know, whereas when you're talking, you're pretty much on the spot with what you want to say. You're able to be a lot more insightful, more in depth when it comes to writing. So there are a lot of benefits to writing, and the biggest benefit is you don't have to physically be there with whoever you're working with, or you don't have to be physically available in a classroom when you're working on any type of writing presentation. Whereas with speech, while it's very easy to get your point across quickly and it's very, very good for maybe initial learning or delivering lectures, it's not necessarily the best thing for giving feedback. It is good for feedback, but it's not the best in terms of giving in-depth feedback. So writing definitely has a lot of advantages compared to just simply giving spoken feedback or lessons. Okay, let's quickly do another activity. I'm going to pull up a poll here real quick. Multiple choice, 1, 3, 4. Okay, what are the benefits to using written communication versus verbal communication? Please go ahead and select the option here between 1, 2, 3, and 4 that you find fits the best. You have 1, quicker feedback, 2, fast-paced, 3, it's more spontaneous, or 4, it's in-depth and insightful. Good. It looks like everybody got that one correct. Written feedback tends to be more in-depth and insightful, whereas verbal feedback seems to be quicker, it's fast-paced, and it can be more spontaneous. Very good, everybody. All right, blended learning. When we look at blended learning in the classroom, the goal is to utilize communication technology to increase the learning and collaboration opportunities between students and teachers and students. And obviously to be able to keep that going when you're not even inside the classroom. Obviously, if we look back like 20 years ago, there's not a whole lot of opportunity for collaboration outside of the classroom. Most of that had to be done inside the classroom, especially in the K-12 environment. Nowadays, with most schools having either a one-to-one or some sort of easy technology access inside the classroom. And outside the classroom, we're able to collaborate much more regardless of where we're at. Quick pause and reflect again. What I want you to do here is I want you to either circle or square one of these responses down here. When are communication technologies used while using blended learning? Or do we only use communication technologies while inside the classroom? Do we only use them outside? Or do we kind of use them both while we're inside and outside the classroom? Go ahead and circle the response or square the response that you believe is the correct answer. We got 1, 2. Yeah, there we go. A lot of different shapes too. Very good. Yep, that is the correct answer. Even though the big benefit is that we're able to do this collaboration and communication outside of the classroom, we also are able to use a lot of those tools inside the classroom as well. So we're not just simply using it in one spot. All right, now we want to talk about how this all is really going to look. If we want to take this information and apply it in our own classes this week. Technology-based activities obviously can be performed in and outside the classroom, kind of like what we just talked about. While activities are traditionally performed inside the class or performed in class, they can be completed outside of class by using these different communication technologies. So things that we typically view as this has to be an in-class activity, thanks to these new technologies that are coming out, we're able to shift some of those activities to maybe being done outside of class and having more of those outside of class activities, such as like outside of class homework or certain assignments, and we're able to do those inside of class. We're kind of able to swap the same amount of time of class, think of it like that, but we're able to swap when we're doing certain things thanks to the technology that's currently available. One of the best examples of this is using flipped classrooms. This would be, and I've seen this used a few times to pretty good success. This would typically be where you take an activity that's generally considered an in-class activity and you deliver it outside of class. And the example is lecture and notes. We typically view lecture and notes as an in-class activity where the teacher has to be at the front of the class, they have to be delivering a lesson, the students have to be sitting there, have to sit there and listen, and then that takes up a large chunk of our class period time, correct? In a flipped classroom, what you'll do is during your planning time, you'll typically record whatever that lecture is going to be using whatever your preferred communication technology or recording technology is, and then you put that on some sort of classroom website, and the student's assignment for that night will be to view that lecture and to take notes and to write down questions they have, and then when they come into class the next day, you start off class by doing taking a couple of minutes to talk about what they would have viewed the night before and to answer the questions that the students have collected that night. And then that rest of that class period can be used for the set students up into collaborative working groups to work on certain assignments or projects and things of that nature. And then when it comes time to deliver another lecture, that would again be assigned outside of class. And I think I might have already talked through all this next slide. Yeah, it's just a good use of classroom time. You're not sitting there talking at students too much. You're taking a classic in-class activity and you're giving it as a 15-20 minute assignment for students to do outside of class. And then you're making yourself available to help students in class where they become confused, whereas typically they might not, depending on how long your lecture takes in class, they might be outside of class working on that assignment and be completely lost. So in this flipped classroom environment, you're there for support for the students when they have questions, and then that night before they can be introducing themselves to the upcoming topic. All right, this is going to be your weekly assignment. So this will have to be done before midnight tonight. It'll be a discussion board activity. And I'd like this to be at least 1 to 2 paragraphs. And once you're completed, please go to another classmate's discussion board and kind of give them a response. Tell them what you think about what they're writing about. What I want you to do after class is to reflect on how you can take your classroom or turn your classroom into a blended classroom. What are you already doing that you can identify as already being a part of a blended classroom? I guarantee you, if you go through and think about it, you're doing things in class right now that would identify your classroom as at least a partially blended environment. And what would you change to your current class environment to make it more of a blended classroom? And then the final thing is, I want you to think about, would a flipped classroom design work for you specifically, or is it something that you think wouldn't work with your particular class? All right, very quickly, kind of what we've gone over today, what we've learned is that using technology in the classroom can improve the sharing of ideas, collaboration, critical discourse, and feedback. We learned that using written communication increases our time to reflect and create insightful responses. And we learned ways in which we can alter our classrooms in order to create a blended learning environment for our students. The resources used today, a quote from Fien Feinberg from Questioning Technology, and Dr. Garrison's book, Thinking Collaboratively. And that's going to be it, folks. Before we leave, does anybody have any questions about the class today? All right, if nobody has any questions, I will see you next week for our next class, and I'll make sure to stay on here for a few minutes in case you have any questions you'd like to ask after everybody else goes. All right, hope you all have a good week. Bye.